before we do before we get into the message, we're going to look at Acts chapter 26 and 25 and 26, but we're going to look at just a short passage of 26 today, because you guys all know where we've been in Acts, and you all know that you're supposed to be doing your homework, so you have read it already, and you don't need me to recap it all. We'll do a little bit of that recap. But before we get there, I want to tell you how to vote. And I hope that you know I'm not going to tell you what to vote for or who to vote for, but I will tell you this. If it matters to you, it matters to God. Have you talked to God about it? That's the question. Because I hear us talking about politics and persons and topics and all kinds of things. There's a lot of anger and anxiety. And I would say this: if you're speaking words that are angry, have you shared them with God first? Because God cares. You can be upset about the way things are, the way things work out. By Wednesday of this week, there are going to be some people are going to be happy and some people are going to be sad. And it's not going to be everybody either way. God still cares. Because in this world, nothing is perfect. Only God is perfect. And there are no easy answers to things. And so I would simply ask, it is our privilege and our responsibility to vote. Beyond that, it is our responsibility, it's our privilege to pray for all of our leaders, not just the ones that we agree with or that appeal to us, not just the ones that we have an affinity with, but anyone who's in a position of leadership. That includes people in the church, people in the government certainly, but we need to be serious when things around us get whipped into a frenzy like they are. Our prayer life is what should respond to that. And I would simply ask you, if you've talked to other people about politics and about voting more than you've talked to God, then you're breaking God's heart, because he really wants us to share with him. He understands and he cares, and he's not on one side or another. He has sent his son to save us from this stuff we call human. It is our human condition that we need to be saved from. And so as you go into this week, ask yourself how you're treating people, knowing that everybody that you meet, whether you agree with them or not, is somebody that Christ died for. Somebody that Christ loves enough to be waiting for that person to speak the words of surrender. And maybe they have spoken those words of surrender, which means they're a brother or sister in Christ. We don't need to separate that family with anger, with fear, with anxiety. We need to work toward trusting God first and loving others and ourselves. So that's how you should vote. But you should vote because that's our responsibility and our privilege in this country. Acts chapter 26. This is the third time that Paul's talking about his experience of conversion. And it's important to realize he's telling this because this is what witnessing is about. He's simply saying, when he gets a chance to speak, he doesn't talk about his credentials. He says, here's what happened to me. God took hold of my life, knocked me down, and picked me back up. That's essentially his message. And that's what we're supposed to do. What we're supposed to learn in this retelling is the importance of the experience that Paul has. Now, in this case, he's kind of worked himself up the ladder. He's speaking now to King Agrippa. He's at the top of the heap of the people that he can influence in the world that he's currently in. And he's looking to get a long way down the road into Rome. And that's in his future. It's a distant time in terms of the actual time, and also the distance between where he is and Rome, where he will end up. So we're in Acts. I'm just going to read a short passage from Acts 26, verses 9 to 19. And I want you to hear, this is the essence of what it means for us. We need to have not this story, but our own story of how God got into our lives, how Christ became our Savior, and what we're doing with it. That's essentially. So Acts 26, verse 9. I too was convinced that I ought to do all that was possible to oppose the name of Jesus of Nazareth. And that is just what I did in Jerusalem. On the authority of the chief priests, I put many of the Lord's people in prison And when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. Paul's admitting he's effectively guilty of murder in the eyes of the church. Many a time, verse 11, many a time, I went from one synagogue to another to have them punished, and I tried to force them to blaspheme. Paul's trying to get them into a position where he cannot just punish them, but take their lives. He is a murderer, and he's seeking to persecute people who are calling Christ Messiah. They're not opposing Judaism. They're just seeming to rattle the cage a little bit. They're seeming to be against the status quo. Many of the leaders of the church in Jerusalem did not recognize Jesus as the Messiah, which is who he claimed to be. And Paul's trying to get people who did recognize Jesus as Messiah to deny that or to blaspheme so that he could call their lives. He is setting people up to kill. This is what he's doing. On one of these journeys, I was going to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priests. About noon, King Agrippa, as I was on the road, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me and my companions. We all fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It's hard for you to kick against the goads. Then I asked, who are you, Lord? I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, the Lord replied. Now get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you to appoint you as servant and as a witness of what you have seen and will see of me. I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. Now, Paul's retelling of this experience has expanded a little bit. I will take a second to point out that is exactly what happens with an authentic witness. As you recount it, as you reflect on what's happened, your understanding and appreciation of it deepens. You have a better grasp on what's really happened inside of you. You have a better awareness. When Jesus says, here I am, I think at the very beginning, you just are stunned that that's who it is. And the conversation and the experience that Paul had with Christ on that road in that time included not just this brief period of time where he says, I am Jesus whom you're persecuting, but Paul then walked into Damascus. He had time to reflect. And so what's happening is his witness is becoming richer. It's becoming more powerful. It's becoming more pertinent as well to King Agrippa because it's a story that makes a little bit more sense with some context around it. But notice what Paul says Jesus says to him. Not just I am Jesus, but Jesus also says, Paul, resisting me is futile. This is like the Borg, right? I know there's a couple of people who understand that. In Star Trek, there was this group of this species, I guess, this race that just took everybody over and they just said, resistance is futile, you'll become one of us. That's essentially, Jesus is saying to Paul, listen, you're kicking against an immovable object. You're going to bruise your foot, you're going to stub your toe, but you're not going to change anything. Understand who God is, and it's not you, it is me. And then he says this, and this is powerful. These words come from a Filipino theologian. His name is Jordan Ryan, and he speaks. This is in a book entitled, a new commentary entitled "The New Testament in Color." It's a multi-ethnic view of the Bible, and this is what he says about this passage, the way this experience for Paul is transformed. He says the retelling of Paul's story exemplifies the subversive nature of salvation history and the reign of God. Paul owns his deeds as a persecutor, so Paul confesses that he was persecuting believers. Paul owns that role. Jesus, who identifies with the persecuted, saying, Paul, you're persecuting me. And I've pointed this out before. That is a powerful statement. Jesus is saying, not you're persecuting my people, but you're persecuting me. Who I am, Christ says, is the body of those who are continuing. And Paul will go on to describe the believers as the body of Christ. This is a powerful thing. And Ryan points out that Jesus identifies with the persecuted, first brings Paul to his knees, then stands him on his feet. The oppressor is disarmed and then transformed. This is a testimony to the disruptive power of Jesus Christ at work in the world, bearing witness to the hope of Jewish and Gentile followers of Jesus alike. Hear that? In that message, Paul identifies himself as a sinner and an enemy of the church. What freedom there is in the ability to own where we've been as being wrong and realize that that is the beginning of a new life, that we don't have to continue. So often I talk to folks, I listen to folks, I counsel with folks, and what I hear so often is heartbreaking. We get into a rut or to a pattern of behavior or belief that we begin to suspect is wrong, but because we're afraid of being alone, because we've identified with people that see it this way, and we begin to suspect that maybe that's not the right way to do things, and we're so afraid of being alone, of being disenfranchised, or admitting that we're wrong and being treated like if you're wrong, you're condemned, and there's no hope for you. We hang on to something that's not right because we're afraid of being completely rejected. But Paul's able to own the fact that he was a persecutor, and he owns the fact that Jesus called him out on it, and Jesus reaches his hand out after Paul has repented. Paul's brought to his knees, and then Paul is lifted up. And he's given the chance not just to see things the right way, but to take the same energy that he was using to fight the message of Christ, the people of Jesus, the people called the Way, the people who recognized that Jesus of Nazareth was indeed the chosen Messiah, the promised one, the one who fulfills the law on our behalf. So Paul, who used to be persecuting people because he was trying to get them to blaspheme, to break the law, he's now got to be the one who declares that this Christ, in fact, fulfills the law, which is no longer the most important thing in Paul's life. This is a major shift, but see how Christ makes it possible. It's so important that we be able to know, to find the safe space, that we are loved and affirmed, and even if we're wrong, that is not the end. It is always in life that Christ looks to transform, and he transforms what we offer to him at the time. If you look in your life, if I look back at my life, I can see different times when I was wrong in my thinking or in my acting about different things, and I couldn't fix them all at the same time. There were times that I wasn't interested in hearing about it, that I was just convinced that I was right, and I wasn't willing to listen. And until I was willing to listen to what God had to say, I wasn't going to change. I wasn't going to change. But when Christ comes in and begins to work, I laugh about this, but it's laughable only in the fact that it's powerful and true. It seems like every time I pick up the Bible, there's something in there that I didn't see before. And it's got something to do about how my life could be a little bit more Christ-like if I would just bend in a certain attitude or a certain activity or a certain thing that I don't do, or, just sometimes we just need to admit that we're wrong and move on. And that's what happens to Paul in his case. And when that happens, Jesus says, I'll rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I will make you mine, Jesus says. I will make you mine. I'm sending you to them to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. And here's the thing, and this is the end of all. This is the only thing that matters, that they might receive forgiveness for their sins, that they might receive forgiveness for their sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. You hear that? The reason Jesus did what he did And the reason Jesus did it in Paul's world, and the reason Paul has understood it, and the reason Paul is standing before Agrippa, and the reason he will continue to push his way into Rome is because people need to know that forgiveness for their sins has already been purchased. There's nobody on planet Earth, past, present, or future, no matter how vile they might appear to be or how distasteful their approach to life is to you or I, their sins have been purchased by Christ. Forgiveness is available, but it's not automatic. The fact that Jesus died for them doesn't mean that they've received the benefit from that. He's paid the price. They need to cash it in. They need to accept that, and they will only know that. They will only receive that if they are told in person. There's no edict that's going to go out and say, y'all are forgiven if you remember to mention Jesus' name. It is a personal conviction. It is a brokenness, just like Paul experiences, that brings us to the point of being forgiveness. But beyond that, it's not just forgiveness, a place to belong. A place to belong. To be among the believers in Christ, to know that we're no longer on the outside. The fear of being isolated keeps us from surrendering the truth about our sin and receiving forgiveness. What Christ wants people to know is he loves us. He loves you. He loves me just as I am. I don't have to do anything more for him to love me enough to die for my sins. But he loves me so much that he's not willing to stop working there. That purchasing my freedom, purchasing my sins on my behalf is not the end of his ministry in my world, but the beginning. Because he loves me so much that not just is he going to save me from my sins, he's also going to lead me to a place that I could never imagine. He loves me as I am to take me where I could never be on my own, to a place where I belong. In a minute, we're going to share communion. And